baddest man on the yard, but he didn't look like the baddest man at all. And this is interesting. I knew him when I was at Huntersville Prison working, and I taught there for a while, and we got along just fine. And when he got out of prison, he got paroled, he rented a house on the same street that we lived on. Teddy Bear. Hearing Harold Furr was the baddest man in Huntersville Prison was a revelation. Pudgy, he had a beard that looped like a horseshoe ear to ear, a Conway Twitty pompadour, and the mustache of a 13-year-old. Nicknamed Teddy Bear, he worked unit maintenance, a smiling, round felon in green fatigues and tool belt, toting a ladder and can of WD-40. He looked like my school janitor. There's no real way to know what a man is like by looking at him. Baddest meant something, but I didn't know what it meant. How could I? A free man, a school teacher who knew when to lower his eyes and walk away. Still, in my romantic way, I fancied myself a kind of outlaw when after class Teddy and I sat and talked at the yard picnic tables, as if the world had done me wrong too. To say he and I were friends is a stretch. We got along just fine, but I knew that if I so much as licked a stamp for him, he'd have me. Parole. He rented a place, unbelievably, at the bottom of my street. Occasionally I'd spy him, shirt unbuttoned on his big white belly, walking Freedom Drive home from his job at Gordy Tire. I'd stop and give him a lift. Things were going okay. Nothing to it, he'd brag, with a big hairy smile. I'd drop him at his little bungalow he was fixing up. He always shook my hand, told me I was good people, and invited me to a standing Friday night poker game. Every Friday I thought of showing up, becoming one of them, a man who could gut out anything, the jolt in prison, the hell kicked out of him, the grease and bust of working with his back for grub wages, chain smoking and drinking cheap beer and simmering danger, bluffing a whole table of ex-cons and bikers out of a jackpot. But in truth, I'm not such a man. Yet all my life I've had to convince myself of this. Affronted or wounded, I plot revenge, but it's merely rhetorical. Mostly I brood. It would not cross my mind to shoot someone. I've never fired a gun of any sort. Teddy, on the other hand, must have offended the wrong person. It's pathetically easy to accomplish. Bump a bet once too often, rat hole your winnings, pull up stakes prematurely. You might even good-naturedly remark at another's unusual luck. Scrape a pot to your chest with too much relish. The list is endless and capricious. You are completely unaware that you've slighted anyone. People grin boozily, shake hands, and assure you they enjoyed it. They'll see you next Friday, but when you're asleep, they return. Not merely in your dreams, but through the front door, and that's that. A convoy of screaming police cruisers, strobing blue the pre-dawn street, yellow vinyl crime tape winding around the pine trees in Teddy's front yard. Hell's Angels kicked in the front door one night during a poker game and did a whole gangland assassination of everybody at the poker table. And every Friday night I would say to Joan, I'm going to go down to Teddy's and play poker. And every Friday night she'd say, no, you're not. So there is a moral to that story, too. Listen to Joan. I'll end with this poem, and I'm glad to answer questions. This poem is called Certainty. And the only thing I need to tell you about this poem is it's that August of '76, and Joan and I and our Vista boss, a guy named Jim Plumley, were at a party, and we were at this party for hours and hours, 5 hours, I don't know. And we had come in Jim's Honda, tiny little, way back when Hondas were first made, and they were just teeny weeny things, and we had parked it up the street and came out. And when we walked out into the street, headed towards the car was coming down the street toward us. Certainty. far from home, penniless, food stamps, everything from Goodwill. I lived with Joan Carey, a Baptist girl from Tucker, Georgia. For $80, we leased a Charlotte attic across from Detox and Memorial Stadium and worked in the prisons. My family in Pittsburgh wondered what I was doing for no wage and why, all the way down in North Carolina, like some agitator. The certainty I lived in then made me happier than I've ever been. One torrid August night, 3 a.m., we barged out of a party at the Weavers, Joan and I and Jim, our Vista boss. We had come in Jim's tiny Honda, brown, homely, tires the size of saucers. We were headed for Krispy Kreme up on Independence, the hot donuts now neon, about to announce yet another epiphany in that enchanted tropical August. Joan was 20, sundresses I remember like pets from my childhood, and Jim so young and confident. Inside they danced to Thelma Houston's Don't Leave Me This Way, setting fire to Hallelujah, the last sacrifice of summer. Hearts and windows shattered across the Queen City. Glad to be together, we stepped into the street toward the car. The night was far from over, yet up in the huge magnolias, early morning cast its thermal hush upon the revel. The three of us saw it at the same time. Jim's Honda, somehow detached from its station at the curb, rolled down the middle of 8th Street. An automobile inexplicably animated with sinister purpose, as if we'd tripped unwittingly through the scrim, segregating us from that other world where things happen for no reason at all. Jim and I intercepted it, backpedaling as it bulled us toward the intersection until we finally halted it inches from catastrophe. We looked at one another and laughed, the way convicts ambling Huntersville Yard laughed about building 30, 40 years in the penitentiary. Guys my age who wouldn't see the streets again until after the sons Joan and I would one day parent had grown into men and left home. The laugh Joan and I exchange all too often when the unimaginable hurtles into an otherwise placid day. The laugh I think of now is fear. Thanks.